This is Dick Stedden of the Country Hour.
Hello there, and welcome again to Town and Country.
Broadcasting live today from the...
And workers are busy planting wetland shrubs.
Since 1945, the ABC's Rural Department has been telling the stories of the people and events that have shaped rural Australia. From droughts and floods...
Heavy rain has caused major flash flooding.
...to cyclones and bushfires.
Country Fire Authority have one desire at the moment.
From locust plagues to cycles of boom and bust.
Oh, well, everybody likes a bang now and again.
To almost every imaginable aspect of everyday country life. Rural reporters have documented every step of history as it has happened.
The GM canola had actually travelled a very, very long way.
It's always been the aim of ABC Rural to not just bring rural and urban people together, but to inform them both equally of what is going on all around Australia.
Supplies come across the range by air, but travel up the coast by schooner, barge and canoe.
The idea of a rural department sprang from wartime necessity.
So is the warfare.
During the Second World War, it was found that educational talks on radio, then a comparatively new technology, could greatly bolster production for the war effort, especially in agriculture. John Douglas, a dynamic agricultural scientist with broadcasting experience overseas, convinced ABC management to set up its own specialist rural department.
He'd seen the idea of agricultural extension through radio broadcasting in the States and Canada, and he'd liked what he'd seen, but he thought he could actually take it further.
This is John Douglas broadcasting.
Chosen to lead the department, the irrepressible Douglas was a perfect fit.
Well, the first broadcast for the ABC on a Sunday morning, it was just any sort of session at all. And the reason I broadcast was the fact I used to get £2, which was a lot of money in those days.
Well, John Douglas was referred to as a bull of a man.
Look forward to, but
during the Second World War, he was in charge of production of food for the Australian Armed Forces and for the government. And he really created a whole new set of priorities for food production in Australia, spurred on by the needs of the American troops.
We all referred to him as JD with some deference. He was really down to earth, but he had a certain magnetism about him, and he was a great entrepreneur.
Hello, everyone. This is Dick Stedden of the Country Hour, with the programme for the farm families of Australia.
In early December 1945, just weeks after the end of the war, the Country Hour hit the airwaves. At noon each weekday, it was aimed squarely at rural Australia and scheduled to catch farmers during their lunch.
How much is the machines? Well, I noticed before, you're halfway through a sheep, you have a spell now. Is that for your own purpose or for the sheep's?
No, actually, that's for the sheep's benefit.
Douglas was energetic, innovative, forceful and visionary.
Fat sheep like these, are you?
He was referred to as a human dynamo, as a rascal. He's called everything under the sun, but above all, he was a doer.
Now, at this point in the juncture, I want to tell you, nobody in the Department of Agriculture, nobody would join the ABC, who they considered an airy-fairy broadcasting organisation controlled by a lot of pansies. Anyhow, to make a long story short, I went round, I recruited some old ABC announcers, all Australians.
The people that Douglas originally hired, he said, Australian voices with all the Australian gravel, and he wanted Australian dirt under their fingernails. They had to know about how to portray a rural story, they had to have a nose for a story, and they had to go to practical farmers to get the information.
Today, an irrigation expert gives us timely information on farm water supply. We advise you of the price your produce realise in the capital city markets. And following the national news at 12:30 Eastern Time, we give you weather forecasts in your particular district for the next 24 hours.
Even the format of the Country Hour was Douglas's idea, because he was very cunning. He said, to really make the program successful, we'll anchor it with a national news bulletin at 12:30, and we'll have a rural serial, the Lawsons as it was in those days, later became Blue Hills, at 1 o'clock. and we'll put our information in between, and that would be a very good way of making the Country Hour 8.
The program broadcast information vital to country folk.
Here are the interstate market reports now. At Cannon Hill sales yesterday, 1,000 calves were yarded, quality was mostly inferior, but prime calves sold to 9pence halfpenny, good 8pence a pound, medium 7pence halfpenny, and bonus 6pence.
Market reports were incredibly important to them, and stock reports, as well as fruit and vegetables and wool reports. All those sort of reports, that radio really was the only way they were going to get them in pretty much real time.
New South Wales, Ellendale.
Very quickly across the nation, the Country Hour became compulsive midday listening.
New South Wales were plentiful at 8 to 16.
And indeed, the Country Hour was of such importance that we had a line from the kitchen to what we call the thunderbox, or is commonly known as the dunny, or these days the toilet, which was a good 100 yards away from the homestead. And this line was connected to a bell in that toilet. And at midday every day, and at 1 o'clock, someone would pull the rope in the kitchen to warn anyone who happened to be on the throne that it was time to get off.